Welcome to the series on improving morale, Part 1, Organizational Factors, and Part 2, Personal Factors, brought to you by Collaborative Resolution Services. Today's webinar, we will first look at an overview of current state of morale in both law enforcement and corrections. We will look at how you approach improving morale. What are the factors you need to take a look at if you're going to improve morale? And then also 15 proven ways to, in fact, improve staff morale. First, a little bit about my background. I've been providing correctional staff empowerment trainings for 30 years around the US, both nationally and internationally. I'm formerly Correction Staff Training Coordinator 2 with North Carolina Department of Public Safety. And in 2004, 2018, the trainings that we provide received the Award of Excellence from the International Association of Correctional Training Personnel, which is the training academy association, trade association. I've had a number of feature articles published, a lot dealing with what we're going to be talking in this webinar, but also in the Part 2 webinar. In those feature articles appeared in Corrections Today, American Jails, as well as the Correctional Trainer, which is a publication of the IACTP. And the articles that have been published that relate to what this webinar is, Improving Morale, was published in both Corrections Today and American Jails, Micromanagement in Corrections Today, and Work Culture in Corrections Today. I have compiled these articles into a book, Mid-21st Century Criminal Justice, Transforming Work Culture, published in 2023. Chronic stress in corrections and law enforcement is caused more by organizational stress than operational stress. And that means the work culture. Relationships form the work culture, and they are in large part determined by attitudes and beliefs. And those are formed in the subconscious or limbic system of our brain. The language of the limbic system is experience rather than words. If you want to connect directly with your limbic system, it needs to be through experience. So to change attitudes and behaviors, experience is the most effective and efficient means rather than just PowerPoint and policy changes. Further, new information alone that conflicts with the existing work culture will be disregarded or minimized by the psychological process confirmation bias. We all have seen this. When we know somebody we really respect, we listen to what they're saying and we take it in. If someone is speaking we don't respect, we dislike, and we don't trust, then we will disregard what they say. For this reason, the best and most efficient investment to improve morale and work culture is the immersive experiential training model. This is where staff actually experience the culture they desire in the training itself. So to this webinar, what does low morale look like? Well, this is a 2017 study of a large DOC of many of the staff. 71% said administration was not actively trying to retain staff. 56% thought of quitting in the last 6 months, and 39% currently wanting to quit. Now, this is before the pandemic, so it was not impacted by COVID. 55% said they have little to no say over what happens on their job. We'll talk a lot about that in terms of what the needs of staff are. 60% did not say they were satisfied with their job. And there's a direct connection with being satisfied with your job and staying on the job. So with 60%, there's a risk of people leaving. 47% felt encouraged by supervisors to do their best in a way they would be proud of. 35% felt the job inspired them to do their best. And 54% did not say they were proud to tell others they worked at their DOC, at their agency. And the best recruiter is current employees. And employees who are proud of their agency will recruit other qualified people. And if they're not proud, they are not going to recruit other qualified people. Low morale, chronic stress, and resulting psychological and physical issues are all related. There's a direct correlation between low morale and thus chronic stress and psychological and physical issues. We don't think so much about the physical issues, but chronic stress changes the brain structure and function in the brain. And this has a direct effect on the body. For example, diabetes, cancer, high blood pressure, heart attack, all of those can be directly related to chronic stress. This is a number of studies have been done about the impact of chronic stress on staff. And they have found consistently that a large proportion, 30% of staff have PTSD. This is true for both law enforcement and corrections. This is double what the vets of Vietnam and Iraq experience. The subscale E of the PTSD assessment, which deals with self-destructive behavior and anger issues, 64% of staff scored high on that. The subscale D, 57% scored high on that. That relates to isolation and the fact that staff can't experience positive emotions. This isolation is a critical issue, and we'll talk quite a bit more about that, and especially in the webinar on personal resilience. 30% have major depressive disorder. Healthy body weight, only 8% in a 2014 national study of corrections did correctional officers have healthy body weights. I've seen other figures that are higher than that, but the point is, and we all know when we see this and look at staff, a lot of staff are overweight. 45% of police officers will have a heart attack by the age of 45. Let me repeat that. 45%, that's almost half of police officers will have a heart attack before their age 45. And we don't have the same kind of research done with correctional officers, but they have twice the cardiovascular risk factors that police have. And police lose twice as many officers to suicide as gunshot and traffic accidents combined, and as many as 25 attempts at suicide for every completed suicide. And 17% of officer deaths that were not reported as suicide later were studied and found, in fact, to be so. So I present these statistics not to scare people, but to say we need to address the chronic stress, the work culture issues, if we are going to turn things around in terms of staff retention and staff well-being. In order to improve morale, there are two areas we need to look at. One is psychological needs. Our jobs in corrections and law enforcement take such a large part of our own identity that if we're not getting our psychological needs met at work, that really creates problems. And that creates problems at home. And we'll talk about that as well. The other important issue is finding out what actually motivates staff. What makes them want to come to work? What makes them want to do well at work? What makes them have a positive attitude on the job? So the psychological needs, there's several of them. First one is a need for connection. We all have this need. We need to connect with others. We are not strong enough. We are not fast enough to survive on our own. We need other people. That's why gangs, that's why churches and religious institutions and organizations, fellowships, all those things are so important for us because we have a sense of being supported by other people, and that gives us a sense of safety and security. The next is a need for meaning. We need to realize there's a purpose for us existing. And that is fulfilled by getting positive feedback, having recognition, and feeling that what I am doing matters. And that's also another big issue within corrections and law enforcement. When you see folks coming back, you arrest them, and within hours or the next day, they're back on the street. When you have an inmate who really looks like they're going to do well when they're released, they go out and within 3 to 6 months they're back, you begin to say, what's the purpose? So that's an important need to meet. The third is the need for power and control. Now, this is not power and control over other people. It's power and control over my own life to make decisions that impact me. The reason this is so important is if I feel I have control, then I have a sense that I can control my safety and security in the future. If I don't have feeling control, I will feel like a victim, and that will create a lot of stress and unnecessary tension within me. The last is a need for fun. We often overlook this, especially as adults. Think of how often you actually do activities that are purely for fun. Playing games with your kids, yes, but playing games like I used to play tennis, and yes, I enjoyed it, but when I went out, I really wanted to win. And so it didn't have the same sense of fun that kids have when they're playing. And I've seen this in refugee camps where people have had everything taken away from them. They had to leave their village with nothing but the clothes on their back, yet they still were laughing and playing because that is a basic psychological need. What's happened in law enforcement and corrections over the last 20 years is we have met less and less of these basic psychological needs of our staff. We used to have activities we did on the outside, social activities. We used to do that. And I'm not talking about going to the pub and drinking. I'm talking about other kinds of activities with family, et cetera. And we've had less and less of that. And I'll also talk more about this a little bit later on. So what does motivate staff? Well, here's a list of the 10 top factors that motivate staff on a day-to-day basis. Number one is management leadership actions that empower staff. And you remember that study, 2017 study, where staff didn't feel administration was supporting them. Well, this is number one, management and leadership actions that empower staff. Transparent and regular communication about factors important to staff. Again, here's the control aspect. Treating employees with respect, involving employees in decisions about their work and job, minimizing the number of rules and policies in an environment of trust. How high is the sense of trust and safety, psychological safety in your agency? Number six, provide regular employee recognition. You see how these directly relate to the psychological needs of staff. Feedback and coaching from managers and leaders so that I feel I am getting the input that allows me to improve and develop as an employee and maybe to gain the skills to move up the supervisory ranks. Above average benefits and compensation. Notice that is number 8. Providing employee perks and facility activities. Positively managing employees with a success framework of goals, measurements, and clear expectations. All of these, you'll notice, have to do with the culture, except number 8. Number 8, above average benefits and compensation, that's good because that is good for recruiting. But it's a double-edged sword. If I have above average benefits and compensation, but I work in a toxic, chronic stress environment, then that may force me to stay when I don't want to stay because I will not get those same level of benefits and compensation in another job with my particular skill level. And in a Massachusetts study a few years ago, that was found to be a factor. I'm not saying the determining factor, but a factor in officer suicides, that I would not leave my job because I had to support my family, I had to support my kids, and I couldn't get the same pay and benefits elsewhere. So I stayed on the job, and that created stress, that created burnout, and that can lead to suicide. So this is serious stuff, folks. How do you rate your morale in your agency? Take a moment just to think, is your morale excellent, good, okay, fair, poor, or bad? Just think to yourself because all of this relates to that. So this is what we will look at now, the 15 ways to improve morale at no cost. Organizational dialogue meetings, eliminate micromanagement, staff well-being in the mission and vision statements, emotional intelligence skills training, staff training a priority, make staff training a priority, revise promotion procedures, staff input in policy changes, recognition of staff, mentor programs, accountability and feedback at all levels, including administration, after work social gatherings, rehabilitation within corrections and community policing within law enforcement, recruitment issues, personal resilience skills, which is the subject of the second webinar on improving morale, and then outside input. Corrections and law enforcement tends to be very insular and not open to input from the outside. So we'll look at each one of these 15 items in detail. So the first one, organizational dialogue meeting. What an organizational dialogue meeting is, where you have representatives from all levels, from the chief or warden down to the officer and all in between, different departments. You may have medical, you may have social services. So you have a good representation of the whole agency. They meet on a regular basis and they talk about policy decisions and issues. And this is a situation. What one agency did is they rotated who led the meetings. If the warden or the chief leads all the meetings, then it defeats the purpose. So empowering your staff so that others can lead the meetings. So policy decisions can be made in these meetings. And obviously, always, the top administration can veto anything, can rule it out. But it's important that this process continue. So the purpose of an organizational dialogue meetings is to develop and support trust, respect, and connection. And it promotes positive and healthy relationships. When people can talk on an equal basis in these meetings, nobody has say over anybody else, obviously, except in the final decision. So it really changes relationships. Effective organizational problem solving. You're not getting decisions made at the top, which is disconnected from the line staff. It's important to get input from the line staff because they know what's going on now. When I was a CEO, I did not know what was going on in the line staff. As much as I had maybe worked there, I did not know by that time because my focus is not on that. My focus is on those above me, on the legislature, top administration. That was where my focus was. So I can't possibly take in all the information from the line staff. So the building blocks of organizational dialogue meetings. Number one, suspension of judgment. That do not judge what people say, but listen If I start judging, I say, no, I'm not going to listen to Charlie because he just BS's all the time. Suspend judgment because anybody can have value in the input that they make. Number two, identification of assumptions. This is critical. So often in law enforcement and corrections, decisions are made based on statements that the assumptions are incorrect. For example, when a suggestion comes up and you say, no, I can't do that because of security. Okay, that may be true. Tell me why this impacts security, and let's take a look at that and unpack that. One supervisor in a supervisor training said that a supervisor, their first response to a new idea is to say yes, not no, but yes. Now let's figure out how it can happen, if it can happen. And it may not happen, but at least you haven't put your staff off and demoralized them. Listen, listen openly and honestly to people. That's important. And have an attitude of inquiry and reflection. Let's look at this as a search, as a problem solving venture. Let's look at new ideas. Let's reflect on what has happened. Has what has happened in the past really had the best end result? So that's the kind of attitude you have in an organizational dialogue meeting. The second element is eliminate micromanagement. Micromanagement is the enemy of staff morale. This was an issue of Corrections Today in March, April 2019. Much of the material within this section of this webinar come from that feature article. So why do supervisors micromanage? They tend to micromanage because they simply don't know any better. Their supervisor before them may have been a micromanager. They did not get the kind of training they needed to get. There are two kinds of training of supervisors. One, what are the tasks? And two, how to be an effective supervisor. So often only, even if that, tasks are trained, staff are trained in the tasks of being a supervisor, but not in how to be an effective supervisor. Another factor can be the culture simply doesn't support leadership. It supports managers, not leaders. In other words, it's a very militaristic approach that I'm the supervisor and that's it. And so the culture needs to support leadership, and we'll talk about that too. The supervisor may have low self-esteem and lack of confidence, so they don't trust that the staff will do what they will do. They don't trust themselves in letting the staff do what they will do, and because they feel vulnerable, so they must be in control of everything. The poor promotion process. Are we promoting people on seniority, or are we really taking a look at what are the qualities in a supervisor that we want? And the supervisor simply may not be able to prioritize. And if I can't prioritize, then everything becomes too important to delegate. That's really important. So the characteristics of a micromanager: resist delegating work, overly involved in work of others, focuses on detail rather than the big picture. When I become a supervisor, my level of awareness of the organization has changed. And that's where my focus needs to be, not in the detail of what my staff are doing. I still need to hold them responsible, but I need to be aware of the bigger picture. Disregard experience and knowledge of other people and other staff. When this happens, you lose loyalty and commitment, and you will have demotivated team. So as that article says, micromanaging is the enemy of staff morale. So specific supervisor skills. It's not so much about being in charge as it is empowering those in your charge. I remember when I was a CEO, I'd go to regional and national conferences, And when there was a break, most of the other folks ran to the phone to call back to their agencies to see what was going on, to see if everything was okay. I never did. I didn't need to, because I empowered my supervisors to be able to do their job effectively. The second is there are two ways to treat staff: by rank and as a human to human. If I am a supervisor and I make decisions and say it's because I'm the supervisor, that's why we will do it, and not explain why, then that is a sign of a poor supervisor, an ineffective supervisor. If I treat others as human to human and I explain to them why this is happening, all the factors, and listen to their feedback, then I am empowering them and I become a leader and a much better supervisor. By rank, because I said so, is a sign of a manager. Explain the rationale so staff understand and listen and consider their input. That's the sign of a leader. And that's what you want to be. You want to be a leader, not a manager who is a pusher. Supervisor skills training. This is what I'm talking about. The kinds of things that we need to train our supervisors in terms of how to do the job. Understand the difference between a leader and a manager. Understand the importance of community building within teamwork. Know and understand your personal management style and how to use it effectively. Oh, is that so important? When we talk about emotional intelligence in a moment, self-knowledge, self-awareness is the basic building block. So know your personal management style. Understand what really motivates staff. We've taken a look at that. Understand and be able to develop teamwork on the job. Understand and be able to delegate and give effective feedback, both positive and negative feedback. We need constructive feedback to help our staff grow. We also need to give positive feedback so that staff feel motivated. I remember when as I said before, when I was a CEO, I had a vice president of the organization come to my facility, and he looked at all over the whole facility, and he said, "John, you run a very effective and a very clean facility. You're one of the best in our company." A couple of months later, the regional manager came, and all she said was, "Oh, I saw some dirt in the corner." Now, how do you think that made me feel compared to the vice president of the organization? So giving positive feedback really matters. Learn how to negotiate for a win-win outcome. There's a lot of negotiation that can go on. We think, well, policies and procedures decide things, but there's a lot of gray issues. Understand the principles and use of workplace mediation. Sometimes there's conflict between staff, and knowing how to mediate that conflict so both walk away feeling listened to, empowered, and feeling not necessarily they got all their needs met, but they felt respected. That's important. Understand the difference between assertiveness and aggressiveness. I've heard how many times I was just asserting my right. Well, was that actually assertiveness or aggressiveness? Really important to know the difference there. And then understand anger, its use, and how to effectively respond to it. If I understand my anger, then it's so much easier for me to control. And I realize there's a positive use for my anger. How well does your agency prepare supervisors before they step into the role? I've known agencies that, and this was before there was the critical staff shortage, you get promoted to sergeant, and within the first year, they will give you a training. That doesn't work. It needs to happen in the beginning. So is your preparation of supervisors excellent, good, okay, fair, poor, or non-existent? Are you supervisors just expected to know how to supervise? Number 3, vision and mission statements that incorporate staff wellness in their statements. So that is a focus. That is really important. Typically, care, custody control, and even community safety are part of the vision and mission statements. What we need to add to that is staff well-being. That is very important because if you have it in the vision and mission statement, you keep referring to it and it stays on the front burner. So that is really important. And staff well-being, this is represented again by the work culture. The work culture determines staff well-being. It's not an indirect connection, it is a direct connection. So this is a grid of different types of culture. You take a look at the structure. Is it flexible? Is it stable? And down at the bottom, is it inwardly focused or outwardly focused? Typically in corrections and law enforcement, we have a task-focused work culture where authority, officer safety, the warrior mentality, individuality, the paramilitary orientation, structure, efficiency, coordination and control are important. It's a short-term focus, and it's traditionally what we have done. Then there's the team, more flexible, where the focus is on staff well-being, staff empowerment, on connection, cooperation, inclusion, communication going up the chain and down the chain. With the task, it's mostly focused on down the chain communication. But with team, it's both down and up the chain communication. We're mentoring and community family orientation, empowering the family, including the family in the life of the agency. Then what are you producing? What are your results? What is the service? Is it a guardian mission, community partnering, service integration, and interagency cooperation? So within law enforcement, it would be that community policing. Within corrections, it would be rehabilitation. So the fourth type of culture is innovation, where creativity, risk-taking, growth, cutting edge, interagency collaboration, research awareness, knowing what the research is saying and incorporating it into your policies. And it's more of a long range vision rather than short range vision. So these are the four types of correctional, of cultures, not just in corrections, but specifically corrections and law enforcement. My experience with 30 years of doing staff trainings is that our focus is 70% on task, only 10% on team staff well-being, although that's increasing in the last 5 to 10 years. Service, which is about 20% focus on the outcome, and 0 on innovation. There's very low risk taking. If somebody tries to do something new, they are often criticized for it, may even be demoted because of that. So what I think we need to be working towards is a more balanced approach, one where task is 30%, team is 25%, service is 25%, and innovation is 20%. Now, we're not giving up on the task because what happens is the team, if we have a better team, that supports the task effort. Innovation supports the task effort. Service supports the task effort. So the task, everything is elevated. One way to look at this, if you do all of these, it's a rising tide lifts all boats. So an example of this is a correctional agency in Norway, where 20, 25 years ago, they were experiencing exactly the same thing that we're experiencing here. High staff turnover, low morale, real issues among staff, conflict, and they decided to make a change. So what they did is they implemented something called dynamic security. And several agencies, recently, Washington, California, Oregon, and North Dakota sent delegations to Norway to learn about this dynamic security. It is where one of the aspects of it is that staff intermingle with inmates all the time in eating, in activities, in games, whatever, playing volleyball, basketball, whatever, that they are totally integrated in that. They are not separate from them. Because of this, staff know more of what's going on and respond quickly and better when any issues arise. Now, there's another factor of what they've done in Norway that may be more difficult for us to accomplish, is that each inmate, this was a high security facility, by the way, each inmate had their own room, almost like a motel room. So they were treated like they were outside, in the sense that what they were learning was how to live on the outside. If you take the culture within a prison in the US and you're enculturated to that culture, then when you leave and go out, it's a totally different culture. And it can be very, very difficult to survive. In terms of law enforcement, examples of agencies that have changed, transformed their work cultures: Camden, New Jersey; Stockton, California; Longmont, Colorado; and LaGrange, Georgia. An excellent book that describes how these police chiefs were able to transform their culture is in Walk the Walk by Neil Gross. That's Walk the Walk by Neil Gross. I encourage people to read that. It's an excellent book, lots of detail. So number 4, emotional intelligence skills. Emotional intelligence skills are self-awareness. Remember, I told you that was the kind of the bedrock, the foundation. Self-awareness, the ability to recognize and understand our own emotions. The second is self-regulation. Once we understand our emotions, then we are able to express, regulate, and manage our emotions. So we don't have outbursts of anger, we don't get depressed. It's self-regulation is the second. The third is motivation. You are motivated by personal reasons and work towards your own goals rather than other people's goals for you or institutional goals for you. Those may be important, but internal motivation comes when we have our own goals that we think we need to accomplish. That can motivate us. Empathy. Once I have self-awareness, then I can have empathy. Without self-awareness, I cannot have empathy. Because if I can't connect with my own emotions, how can I possibly understand yours? And that's the ability to understand how other people are feeling and recognize how you would feel in their position. Extremely important in how we respond. If somebody comes back from court and they got an added 3 years added onto their sentence, for us to understand the anger, the depression, the emotions of someone coming back, we can deal with them much more effectively as a correctional officer. And then also understanding on the street what people may be going. If you got a group of people, that influences their behavior as opposed to a person one-on-one. And the last is social skills, the ability to interact socially with others and successfully navigate social situations, effectively pursuing our goals. This deals directly with dealing with other staff, and when you're out in the public, dealing with the public, dealing with the community. Having those social skills are extremely important. Emotional skills training. Does your agency train staff in emotional intelligence skills? Yes, we do it in orientation training. Yes, in-service training. Yes, in both orientation and in-service training, or no. And I might also add, is this experiential training or is this lecture talking about emotional intelligence? Think about that for a moment. Traditional training looks at custody, care, and control. That is job focused. What we need to be looking at now is staff well-being as well as the job focus. And that would include relationship, resilience, and responsibility, and also obviously include care, custody, and control. So this is how we need to be looking at doing staff training, adding the relationship, resilience, and responsibility to it. And it doesn't have to be that much that you are adding. I mean, you say, well, how many days? Well, 3 or 4 days. This is an example of an emotional intelligence skills training. It's called, and I mentioned this earlier, the immersive experiential training model. where staff actually experience in the training the kind of culture that you want to be in your agency. And specific training that we provide is team building, attitude, conflict transformation training, or simply TACT. And I will say a little bit more about this in a moment. But right now, what I'd like to do is to share with you a visual metaphor for, see if I can get this visual metaphor.
Hello, my name is John Schufert with Collaborative Resolution Services. We have been providing staff development training for 26 years. We've provided many trainings in the U.S. as well as overseas. The training has been very successful and very effective at changing attitudes and improving staff morale, and therefore improving the culture, the working culture within prisons. One of the things that we know about corrections today is that our staff are suffering many problems. PTSD up to 30%, major depressive disorder up to 30%, anxiety, alcoholism, high suicide rate, twice that of state police, and many other problems occurred, as well as the life expectancy of a correctional officer is 20 years less than it is for the population in general. So why is that? Well, when I talk to staff, they say it's because of the high stress level. And what happens with chronic stress when you face it every single day is it literally makes changes in the brain. A substance called cortisol is released. And what is occurring is the brain is thinking that there's going to be some serious threat that's going to occur very soon. So it gears up for that. Our brains are great for that. But one of the problems with chronic stress is there's never a letdown. Many thousands of years ago, when the saber-toothed tiger came and attacked us, we had that adrenaline rush. The cortisol was released in the brain. Then we were either dead or we survived. And then our stress level went down. What happens now is every time a correctional officer comes to work, they feel their stress level comes up. So one of the reasons why there are all these problems is that correctional staff don't feel connected to each other. They don't feel connected to their supervisors. They don't feel connected to administration. When I've talked with staff about why they leave correctional service, it's because of conflicts with other staff, poor supervision, and a lack of trust for administration. So what happens with this chronic stress is we close off from our own emotions. And this is a coping mechanism that's very effective in a crisis, but not effective as a long-term strategy. So when we cut off from our emotions, that means we also cannot feel what somebody else may be going through. And therefore, we don't have a high level of empathy. So one of the things that this training does, the Team Building Attitude Conflict Transformation Training, or TACT training, one of the things it does is create a sense of safety, a sense of connection within the group that's in the training. When that occurs, the staff feel safe and they become more relaxed, they're having fun, they let their barriers down, so now they're open to new ideas and new concepts and new skills. So that's one of the reasons why this training is so effective. Now I want to demonstrate this. If we say that this T is the stress, the high stress level, the conflict, etc., that staff are going through, you can go through therapy, etc., and some of it will come out, but it's still basically there. So what TACT training does, Team Building Attitude Conflict Transformation, is it creates that sense of safety. So we'll say the water represents the sense of safety, the sense of respect, the sense of trust. And when staff experience this, look what happens. As they go through the training, they begin to feel more connected with each other, and actually relationships have been healed within the training itself. But you also notice that the toxicity that was in the person is now less and less. So in one training of 2 days or 3 days, staff can literally transform their attitude. When they transform their attitude about themselves, it also transforms their attitude about others. Because my attitude is how I see the world. So now you've got a staff member who feels connected to the other staff and feels a sense of responsibility that he or she can now change the culture within the prison. We've seen this happen numerous times where literally the culture within the unit changes, and when a number of units change, then the culture in the whole prison changes. So I just wanted to take a moment to share with you why visually the TAC training from Collaborative Resolution Services works so effectively. Thank you.
So that was a visual metaphor of the TAC training. Number 5, make staff training a priority. Give staff the tools they need. Staff in general don't have all the tools, especially the personal relationship tools, the emotional intelligence tools, and they need to have that in order to effectively do their job because they're dealing with people. Whether you're a correctional officer or law enforcement, you're dealing with people every single day. And if you don't have those people skills, yes, you have the authority, but many a situation, especially in law enforcement, where you go in as a gangbuster, you create problems. And we all know staff, Charlie's going to be assigned with you today. Oh no. Oh boy, it's just going to be, man, it's going to be a bad day. There's going to be so much conflict, so much tension. I much prefer to have James be my partner because then I know things will be quiet. So having those interpersonal skills are critical to success on the job. The warrior versus the guardian versus the change agent. We talk a lot about the warrior versus guardian, but we also need to have the change agent where the law enforcement in the community can be a change agent. And that's what community policing is all about, where you help communities, empower communities rather than you making decisions for them, you empower them to make their own decisions. And obviously that's true in corrections with inmates, that you empower. And you are the best person, the correctional officer is the best person to be involved with rehabilitation because you're with the inmate every single day. And they look to you, and if you have a good relationship with them, that can be transformative for the inmates. Extend the time and increase the budget. This is obviously more money, and it's the only item in these 15 items that'll actually cost more money. That is not just a change in attitude. This is important. In Norway, it takes 2 years to become a correctional officer. 2 years. They train them in psychology. They train them in all these other psychological skills. And 2 years they train. South Africa is 6 months. What are we? 6 weeks? 8 weeks? 9 weeks? We need to really include all of these, the full range of skill development in training and also in service. Include training academy and policy decisions. So often policy decisions are made and not considered the training academy and how they can implement them. The principles, in terms of the immersive experiential training, there's the principle of the 4 E's. I want to share this with you, not that you have to do this training, but if you can include these 4 E's in your training, it can be transformative. First, you engage the staff. 2, you energize and excite them. 3, you empower them by giving them the skills so that they feel they can make a difference and make a difference in their own lives and therefore the agency, and you make it enjoyable. When any of us are enjoying an experience, we are open to new ideas. If I'm feeling stressed, then I'm closed off. So by engaging, we create safety And in the very beginning of the training, you gain the respect of the participants. If you're there just to do your job and you get in there and say, and I've heard this, look, I got to do this, got to get to do this training. We know we all have to do that. It's just part of the training protocol. You're not going to get the respect of the participants. And you're not going to build trust in the training itself, that the training will positively impact the staff and that they will want to be open to new ideas that the training will provide. You energize and excite the staff. That builds hope for personal change. And when they see that personal change in themselves, which they actually will see in the training, this is not something that happens after. They experience the change within the training. And that gives them a sense of hope for institutional change. That if I can change my unit and others can change their unit, we can change the whole prison, the whole agency. And hope is a very powerful drug. We increase self-awareness. This energy in the training increases self-awareness. We increase connection with other staff, and that's really important. When I do a TAC training, I have all levels, all departments. I've had wardens in with COs and with administrative staff, secretaries, medical, social service, all departments, all levels. And that really has an impact on staff connecting with each other. I actually had a social worker say, I never thought there was a human being behind that black uniform. It changes people's relationship. And also in one agency, a very large county prison system, what happened is on the unit, when medical was called up, security would go, oh God, here they come. They don't understand count, they don't understand this, they don't understand that. It's just going to create more darn work for us. After the training, what happened is the security staff asked the medical to come to their unit, and they talked about all these issues and their processes. So now what happens? Before, what would happen is security would call medical only at the last moment. If someone was suicidal, they would only call them at the last moment. Now they connect with medical as well as social services before things become an issue. So, it's much better to solve a problem when it's small. Empowering staff. They experience a positive attitude change. They get emotional intelligence skill development. They get a sense of personal responsibility for change, and it counters the hopeless, helpless attitude that staff often have. It's been this way for 20 years, 2,000 years. Man, it's not going to change now. What happens is when they see the change in themselves, they begin to see things more positively, and then it begins to make significant changes in them. Have it enjoyable, safe, relaxed, and fun. This, as I said before, this opens staff up to new information. They retain that learning longer. I think I mentioned that the changes in staff, they did a 6-month follow-up. They were still using the skills 6 months later. Now, how many trainings have you gone to where 6 months later, 80%, over 80% of the staff were still using those skills at work as well as at home? And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. And it creates a staff bond, which we've just mentioned. So to show you what kind of impact this type of training has, here's some direct comments, and I didn't cherry pick these. This is consistent throughout. When I left class the first day, my stress was removed, and I was very relaxed and calm. I've shared more in the past 2 days with coworkers than I have shared in the past 16 years. Everyone was comfortable being themselves. And you say, well, how can there be this kind of a change in a 3-day or 2-day training? Well, my response is, you know what kind of an impact a 5-minute trauma will have for you and the rest of your life? Why can't there be a positive change to have that kind of a long-term impact? The energize and excite. I enjoy the unity of the class and the energy to want to do better and to work as a team. This training has inspired my thinking at home and work in a very positive way from day one. My attitude and coping skills have very much improved. I felt like a dead battery for the last 10 of my 18 years. but this training changed all that. It charged up my morale and my attitude. And that particular officer used to, this, the inmates used to fear going to him, even to ask for a haircut. And I found this out later after the training because the inmate had talked to me about this. And after the training, when the staff, that officer, when someone would come into the problem, he simply would say, "That's not my problem. Get the hell out of here." Now he would say, "Let's talk." And so now the staff felt they enjoyed going to him. We're not talking about being friends, no, but what this gave that officer is more information of what was going on in the unit, where staff were afraid to approach him previously. This is the kind of change that occurred. Empower. I now have a whole new set of tools, and it made me think how I can change the prison. I will make my journey as an officer safer. Outstanding class. A whole new outlook on things on the job as well as at home. My wife has already noticed the change. Make me a better supervisor. Put my staff first instead of last. I got feedback from an officer that his supervisor would hold a staff meeting, and he told them he was the only one who spoke, and he didn't allow the staff to speak. And when they would come up with something and say a question, he would say, "Hey, it's my way or the highway." So that was the kind of staff supervisor he was. After the training, he totally changed. And now he listened to his staff. They made decisions together. And the staff person said the whole morale of the unit has transformed and changed. It's now a much more pleasant place to work, where before it was very hostile and toxic. The training academy told us what our job was, and you taught us how to do it. I've already mentioned that. Enjoy. This training was life-altering. Best I've ever had in my 25 years with the state. This is consistent. Every single training, these are the kinds of comments. This class was one of the most enjoyable, most beneficial classes I have ever attended. The most informative and enjoyable attention-keeping class I have attended. I was not looking forward to this, but I so loved this training. I am so glad I was forced to attend. I will never forget this training. Over the 3 years, the evaluations have come back as excellent, 77% very good, 20%, 3% good, 0 fair, 0 poor. And some of the staff, all the staff that I'm doing training, it's mandatory. And you can imagine the attitudes of staff coming into mandatory training by some outside guy who's talking about conflict resolution. And as I said before, 6 months post-training, over 80% continued to use their skills on the job and at home. And that's a critical factor, at home, because we know all the kinds of conflicts with family that occur. And interesting, psychologist, marriage counselor, made the comment that when staff do not share power and control at home, 85% of those marriages result in divorce. 85% result in divorce. So it is so important to share the power and control. And you say, well, keep your home life separate from your work life. That's fantasy. There's just no way you can do that. How you are at work is how you come home. How you are at home is how you go to work. If your kid's having a tough time into drugs, whatever, and you go to work, you're not the same. You're not the same. So it's important that whatever skills we learn, emotional intelligence, that they're such that we can use them at work as well as at home. Here's some pictures of a training. This is doing one of the Light and Livelies, or one of the games. And you can see how much fun they're having. You see the guy in the top right. He was a lieutenant. His staff told me afterwards they had never seen him smile at work, ever. When you're having that much fun, you're open to new ideas, to new concepts. And the training also has problem solving, group problem solving skills, verbal skills, nonverbal skills. And here's some more of those pictures. And the training academy at the top left, When I started the training, I found this out 2 years after I had done the training at the Training Academy staff so that they could provide it for the new recruits. I was told by Lieutenant Lutz, the second in command, at an awards thing where I was receiving one of those IACTP awards. He came up to me and said, John, I don't know if you realize this, but our department was in such disarray. There was so much conflict. We literally had a plan on the books to transform every single employee except myself and the director. After the training, nobody was transferred. They started communicating with each other, connecting, the stress level went down, and one of those staff members left because she couldn't stand this new trusting environment. So that's the kind of impact this can have. And this was at the New Jersey Training Academy. Words cannot express the value of the training. The impact it's had on staff is remarkable. I am constantly amazed at the transformation our staff experiences during the training sessions. There is actually a paradigm shift from the rigidity and inflexibility ingrained in corrections to the understanding and acceptance of the value of community and teamwork. And also, Chris Money at Marion Correctional Institution in Ohio. It is generally thought to be the best training program that staff has participated in. The labor unions are strong supporters of it, and employee grievances have dropped to an all-time low. Thank you for helping us change the culture at MCI. It is the best investment of resources that we have ever made. What I did there, because their training academy just was overwhelmed, I trained line staff to provide this training. I trained, it was lieutenants, captains, it was COs. I trained those staff, line staff, to provide it. And that's the impact that they had. So it doesn't have to be just training academy staff were trained, it can be line staff. And then finally, from a captain, to be the best trained correctional professional in the nation, that is our mission. And this training, by far, is the best way I have found to complete this goal. Our staff are advocates for how much your class has helped them as a team and how much they love passing the training on to the trainees. That's a pretty powerful statement. The benefits to staff are increased self-awareness, increased attitude skills, which is increased self-awareness, increased empathy, sense of personal responsibility, and improved emotional management. Interpersonal skills, listening skills, assertiveness skills, and conflict resolution, and prevention skills, and that's important, the prevention skills. Increased trust in and respect for self and others, resulting in a sense of hope that positive change in the work environment is not only possible, but likely. And the organizational benefits, as I've said before, improves relationships and cooperation among staff, relationships between supervisors and staff, improves attitude of staff toward administration, improves cooperation between departments, improves teamwork, improves morale, job effectiveness, and job satisfaction, which are related to improved staff retention and lower turnover. Supervisors improve skills as leaders and not just managers. Number 6, revise promotion procedures. Evaluations based on 360-degree feedback process. That means you get feedback from your supervisors and feedback from those you supervise. That is really important, and that rarely happens. Decisions are based on qualities desired and not seniority or favoritism, and I've mentioned that before. Some examples of criteria. Service, and by service, I mean our job is to be of service, but also as supervisors to be of service to our staff, to empower our staff, to help them identify career goals and opportunities, to be aware of staff burnout, and to help our staff build skills, knowing that with the new skill development, they may leave our department, they may be promoted outside. But our service is not only to the community, to the agency, but also to those we supervise. The second is honesty. Honesty with ourselves, knowing who we are, knowing our strong points and our weak points. And this is essential for building rapport with your employees. Correctional officers respect leaders who can admit their faults. We all know an officer, supervisor or not, who does not admit their faults or problems that they have. How much do we respect them? We simply don't. The second part of honesty is we must be honest with those we supervise. And as I said before, we must give positive, constructive feedback, but also positive feedback. And the third part of the honesty is with our supervisors. We must be honest to those we report. I'll give you an example. A good friend of mine was a commander in Afghanistan. And every time he passed up progress reports to his supervisors, he did it honestly, exactly, saying, hey, we've really got problems here with the Taliban. They are taking over villages that, we really do have problems. But his supervisor said, we can't pass this up the chain. It makes us look bad. So only passed up positive information. So the top level, including the president, only got positive feedback as to what progress was being made. So why do you think they were shocked and ill prepared when the Taliban took over? Simply because they didn't know. And so it's important to pass that information up the chain so those who make the decision aren't caught with their pants down, aren't caught off guard. The next item is integrity. And that means doing what you say and consistently doing what is right. That's extremely important, and not be corruptible. Staff and supervisors who play favorites, who fraternize with the inmates, who become corrupted, big problem as far as promotion. Humility, being humble, realizing that you have much to learn. You don't know everything. Even if you've been in the job for 20 years, you still have things you can learn. And it doesn't mean that, let me say this, if a junior officer is more skilled at a certain skill than you are, it's important to acknowledge that, because that empowers them. So humility, and what I have seen happen is a supervisor will take credit for positive change or for a positive event and not give it to his staff. What that does is it demoralizes the staff. Whereas if you empower your staff, if you give them credit for the change, then they've got credit, and you will always get credit from above, from your superiors. So therefore, more credit is created than just by you. Strong sense of purpose, of what you are doing. This cultivating a sense of purpose, the importance of what we're doing, having passion from our work, and it helps employees see positive effects of their work. Give you one example. Way back when, President Kennedy went to the Space Center, the Kennedy, what's now called the Kennedy Space Center, and he was down in the lower parts of one of the buildings, and he came upon a custodian, a janitor, who was sweeping up, and he struck up a conversation with him, and he said, well, what do you think your purpose is? And he was thinking, well, making sure the hallways are clean, making sure that sort of thing, things are organized. And the person looked at him and said, sir, my purpose is to help get a man on the moon. Do you see how that greater sense of purpose, that was really important? And the last quality is positivity. If I am positive and I see things from, there's positive and negative things that happen. And if I have a negative attitude, then that's what I see. If I have a positive attitude, I'm more likely to see that, more likely to make our staff feel better. When you talk with someone, and if they are depressed and feel very negative, and you ask them, what was your child like? childhood like? Often they will come up with negative things. My father was a boss, there was abuse in the family, or this or that. Whereas if you talk with someone who has a positive attitude, feels good about themselves, when they look back, they will think about positive things. So these are the 6 qualities that you want in a supervisor. A service orientation, they are honest, they have integrity, they have humility, they have a sense of purpose, and they have a sense of positivity. Number 7, get staff input on policy decisions. And this can obviously be done by the organizational dialogue meeting. This will empower the staff and will motivate them, because we talked about their needs for control, their need to feel that they're valued, important, and their input is important. Number 8, recognition. Giving recognition that the staff wants, not just a token recognition, not just a dinner or something like that, but something that they really want. Make it meaningful to staff. Annual is good, more often is better. And the best people to give that kind of feedback are supervisors and administration are best. And do that on a regular basis. And something that I have always done, MBWA, manage by walking around. Notice positive things every single day. My president or vice president of the organization, the corporation, came in, gave me positive feedback. That's really important. And try to get to each unit you supervise on a regular basis. Our schedules may not be able to allow us to do it daily, but at least weekly to get there. And what happens is staff get used to you coming, and they're not threatened by that. Whereas if you never go to a unit and now you go to CPOD and you haven't been there, all of a sudden they say, what's wrong? Is he going to give us, some static, some problems? But, I remember as a CEO, the one time I couldn't do it was during budget. I had to be focused, 12 hours a day, whatever it was, on the budget. But other than that, I always went around, and you find out things. You will learn so much more of what's going on, that staff are really angry because there's no out in the front gate, there's no awning over where we have to stand in line waiting to check through security. And I won't know that. But if I'm talking to staff, they will tell me, hey, it's miserable when it's raining. I come in, I have to stand out in the rain for 15 minutes while security goes through at the beginning of shift. You wouldn't have known that unless you had walked out there and been with your staff. Mentor programs, both one-on-one and group mentoring. And what's really important about mentor programs is the mentors must possess the desired qualities. If you have a mentor, again, because he's got 5, 6, 8, 10 years in, and he doesn't have the qualities, that's what he's going to pass on. So that's crucially important. Number 10, accountability and feedback to all staff. And I mean all staff, including administration, that they get the feedback. Rarely does administration give feedback on how well they're doing their job. And you may say, well, that threatens their authority. No, it doesn't. I'm sorry, it doesn't. If you have trust and you treat people as humans and not just as rank, you will get the kind of feedback you need to improve so you can improve your institution. Number 11, connect out of work socially. We don't do that. Yeah, I mean, the job is the job. Well, the sign of a good supervisor is one who cares about his staff and knows about their staff, can ask about how is your kid doing? How was that baseball game that your kid was in? Those are very important things in terms of morale, in terms of connection and sense of community. And what I've heard from staff is 20 years ago plus, we used to do that. We'd get together, we had a volleyball team, we had a baseball team, we would play other facilities, we play other agencies. Man, we had so much fun doing that. Now, they don't let us do it because they're afraid if we socialize with supervisors, we'll no longer respect their authority. That's just not true. We have the ability to discriminate. How I treat you at work can be different than how I treat you at home, if um, if that is what is needed. Connecting out of work socially with family events and sponsored social events, establish sports and other teams, experience each other as people without rank. When I do the TAC training, rank and uniforms are not part of the training. You come in street clothes and there's no rank. So we take on adjective names, which is kind of a fun thing. And that uses our first name. So I had a deputy warden and he was Dynamic Dave. Did that affect his relationship on the outside? Absolutely not. He was still the deputy warden. But in that training, he was a human being. He was a fellow staff member. That really changed the relationship that he had with his staff in a very positive way. Experience each other as people without rank truly builds camaraderie. That has been my experience. That is how you change the work culture. Does your agency promote staff socializing off the job? Yes. And sponsors activities? Yes, but does not sponsor activities? No. Discourages getting together outside of work. And it gives, as I said before, not going after work to choir practice. That's what's been called going into the pub and you bitch and moan to each other about your work and et cetera. It's called a choir practice. So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about social activities when you're intermingling, especially with family members. So just think for a moment. Number 12, rehabilitation and community policing. Rehabilitation in corrections and community policing in law enforcement. What this does is increases meaning of the job, that you are having an impact, you are seeing change. This is how we get a sense of meaning in our life. You know how you feel when your kid really does well? That gives you a sense of meaning. You've done a good job. It also improves community relations. Obviously, in community policing, that would improve community relations because now you're relating to them as a resource person as opposed to a law enforcer. And as a resource person, they will come to you more quickly if there are issues. Rehabilitation, extremely important, as I said earlier. What happens is if you change the culture in the prison so that staff become more motivated, the morale goes up, then you're much likely to have a better relationship with the community. And when you try and recruit, you're going to have more success. It improves morale, motivation, and self-esteem. And it improves job satisfaction, which is directly related to job staff retention. Directly related to job retention. Recruitment, number 13. As I said before, salaries and benefits are important, but best recruiters are your current staff if they're proud of the agency. And utilize specific criteria for desired employees, recruiting warriors and warm bodies who will not stay is self-defeating. Number 14, personal resilience. The webinar that I did on May 11th with Justice Clearinghouse, the 7 keys to personal resilience. That is an excellent resource. And the American Jail September-October 2023 issue, Personal Resilience, How We Have Missed the Mark. These are the 7 basic areas for personal resilience. I won't talk about them now, but the importance of relationships, family and friends, positive social interaction, including volunteering, activities, exercise. One of the things about exercise, it's one of the best things you can do for your brain because it impacts the function and the structure of the brain. It's amazing how important exercise is and how many of us do exercise on a regular basis. Meditation, sleep, extremely important, and flow. Being in an activity you enjoy so much, you totally lose track of time. For me, it's either working in the garden, woodworking, jogging, whatever, but you lose track of time. Mindfulness, savoring each moment. And one technique is focusing on your breath, on your body, and on your heart. People don't know that their heart has some of the same cells as our brain does and can function to some extent independently. That sounds strange, but it's actually true. Visualization, what we visualize makes what will happen more likely. You've seen basketball players at the foul line visualizing making a basket. Our attitude, extremely important. Having optimism, the skill of reframing, seeing something in a different light. Gratitude, very important if we express gratitude. And then also forgiveness. We don't forgive for the other person, we forgive for ourselves. And a belief system in something bigger than us. And having personal and career goals. All those are covered in the part 2 of improving motivation, personal resilience. And all of these increase connection with self and or with others and combat isolation. Personal resilience skills, teach in BLET and orientation and regular in-service. I will, if the staff understand these skills, it will really increase their longevity. And educate staff on the importance of off-job activities. Share statistics of morbidity and mortality, the ones I did earlier, of chronic stress on the job, so they realize how important it is to take care of themselves and to do activities that increase their personal resilience. Very important. And finally, encourage staff to develop a personal wellness plan for career survival. They become conscious of what they're doing and not just go day to day, but they are looking at the bigger picture, their staff well-being. And 15, the last item is actively seek out current research on staff wellness and open up to community input and resources and implement what you've learned. It's you can read articles, but if you don't implement them, what good do they do? There's a jail in Northeast Pennsylvania, Pike County Jail. They had 100 volunteers coming in, and they had almost 100 different programs, all different kinds, knitting, whatever you want to say. It was a male institution, a male jail. And you know what their recidivism rate was? 10%. 10%. They had 50% vacancy of their beds, 50%. And with those, they rented them out to the U.S. Marshal Service. So what they did is they really empowered, gave skills to the inmates. So when they went back out in the community, and what it did, the relationship with the community was phenomenal. The community really respected and liked having the institution there. That is transformative, folks. That is transformative. So these are the 15 ways: the organizational dialogue meeting, eliminate micromanagement, staff well-being stated specifically in the mission and vision statements, emotional intelligence skills training, staff training a priority, revise promotion procedures, staff input on policy decisions, recognition of staff, mentor programs, accountability and feedback, after work social gatherings, rehabilitation and community policing, recruitment, personal resilience skills, and outside input. So all of this is in the book, Mid-21st Century Criminal Justice, and that is the QR code for that book. You can get it on Amazon. This presentation is meant to help improve staff well-being, and this information should be incorporated in staff training, both in orientation and in-service trainings. Educating staff on the importance of what they do off the job will greatly improve their resilience on the job. These skills will help staff de-isolate, resulting in a step toward increasing their well-being and the transformation of their work culture. The feeling of isolation is the primary cause, or at least a major contributor, to virtually all of the psychological and physical problems criminal justice officers experience that are due to chronic stress. It is the organization's responsibility to itself and its staff to provide the tools and skills necessary for them to effectively do their job and remain on the job until retirement. This will greatly improve staff resilience, which is the goal of all of us. Thank you for participating in this webinar. Take care, and I hope this has been useful.